feel that the projections for population essentially east of the lake are against the trends that are happening in virtually all urban areas. And whether or not they have transit. They're true in Chicago, which has transit. They're true in Cleveland, which has transit.
I found no national trend that they're against. For example, I think they're conservative in recognizing the number of people that want to come west. I'm not talking about babies being born. I'm talking about the number of immigrants to this area from other parts of the United States.
And secondly, the basic population projections, which don't reflect great changes in our birth rates and fertility rates. That is the style in which we have children today, which is different than it was a generation ago.
If Professor Horwood has some new prescience of the habits of people in producing babies, fine. I don't have it. I don't think anybody has it. We try, and I say Puget Sound Governmental Conference tries to use the best data there is. And there are national norms being used all over the world for such forecasts. But the most important point is, should we create completely splintered planning by everybody that wants to do any planning using a different population forecast? I say no, there ought to be one.
The majority of the population growth that's anticipated, most people reasonably agree that it will not be within this now densely built up part of the city, but rather at the suburban fringe. Now the question becomes, where will the jobs be located for those new residents, those new families in the suburban areas? And we feel that an unnaturally large percentage of those jobs in the model that has been put forward that underlies this plan are located in the central business district.
I don't consider they're unnaturally large. All you have to do is look at what's been happening in San Francisco when the Bay Area Rapid Transit System isn't even open yet. And there are about $850 to $900 million of new buildings have been started or completed near the stations.
It has been thought by many of my architectural friends believe that a city should be a lively place where there's a lot of activity in the streets. But this doesn't necessarily come about in off-work hours in large cities which have large office buildings. Houston, which is a great central city as far as office buildings is concerned, has one of the deadest cities I've ever seen at night. It takes the kind of a development like you have in Vancouver, where you have a lot of housing nearby to bring life to the center of the city. I think that we've forgotten that. Also, this is an opportunity to have a certain number of people, and a lot of people as far as Vancouver is concerned, living fairly close to work. Vancouver is, to my way of thinking, a very interesting model to compare.
Absolutely not. In fact, Vancouver is congested to the hilt in their downtown area. They've got too many vehicles. They've come down here, many of their leaders, on several occasions to ask us how they can get rid of that problem. We say the solution lies in high-capacity, people-moving mass transit.
This group of University of Washington professors has surfaced as the major academic opposition to the rapid transit proposal. The gulf between these men and Forward Thrust perhaps is a matter of political philosophy. There is no governmental mechanism in this country which allows planning, regardless of its excellence, by decree. The political realities of the rights of private property and a pluralistic democracy which pits one group's interests against another makes city planning at its very best inefficient. Planning can change an area, but only after a political fight. The Forward Thrust men, Goldie and Ellis, are activists. As slow and inefficient as the democratic system can be, that's where the political wars are fought.
Our lack of faith in the underlying plan about where jobs ought to be, and our lack of faith in the population forecasts made it very difficult for these people to accept our advice, because it would lead, if our plan came true, it would tend to lead to less growth in the area that these people now work in and have an interest in. And so it's a sort of a matter in some respects of self-interest. And our interest in the way in which we think the metropolitan area ought to grow is just fundamentally different from theirs.
This debate is academic because we have no way of building satellite cities under a democratic government that we have here and the way we operate. For example, I visited Stockholm a few years ago, which is a beautiful city and has lovely satellite cities and a very efficient, clean mass transit serving. And I couldn't understand why we couldn't do that. Well, I found out. It's a socialist government there. The city owns the land, and they can do it with it whatever they please. They also don't have to pass bond issues to extend the rail system. They just do it.
The system is so tremendously massive and so expensive, we just do not have enough people to ride it, nor to pay for it, nor the tax base that's necessary to pay for it, and we're not going to have, even by their own projections.
The outspoken leader of the anti-rapid transit forces east of Lake Washington is Realtor Vic Gould. He sees the Metro organization as a threat to the free enterprise system, and he is a passionate foe of the rapid transit on practically every count.
It requires high density of some 15,000 riders per hour per peak route to justify this system. And even on the consultant's own figures there, about 8,500 is the most we can generate. Otherwise, you cannot justify the tremendous cost of this thing.
Well, Mr. Gould quotes all sorts of figures, and I hadn't heard that particular one from him. Incidentally, I enjoy arguing with Mr. Gould, although he is a bit demagogic at times. Fundamentally, there is no such justification number. People have thrown around all sorts of numbers. The question is one fundamentally of, does it carry enough passengers to make sense? Now, an interesting authority on this is the Automobile Manufacturers Association, who said if you're carrying somewhere between 8,000 and 12,000 passengers per hour, that it's probably justifies such a system.
Let's take the bonding capacity of Metro alone here. Is at present only about $252 million, and yet this bond issue is $440. So we're almost $200 million over our present bonding capacity if we approve this thing now. And this is what the people don't know or understand.
That is perfect, complete nonsense. We wouldn't have possibly put all this work into it without carefully considering all of the legal requirements.
The fact of the matter is, of course, that we had never had any intention, nor would it make any sense to issue all $440 million at the same time. Some of the bonds will be issued early in the effort that will only be 2-year bonds or 4-year bonds, and they'll already be paid off before the remainder are issued. Others won't be issued for 15 years, and those, by that time, the bonding capacity will be higher. A committee of very prominent economists and bankers in this town, I'm sure you know who they are, established this forecast of Metro's bonding capability, and we are only using 85% of it at any given time. Now, it's a conservative estimate.
Well, primarily it's rail that I'm opposed to because, number one, of its inflexibility. It's designed to force high-density, high-rise building clusters around every one of the 27 rail stations. It violates every existing comprehensive plan in the King County area here.
You mean land use plan?
Land use plan, that's right.
Well, I guess somebody ought to take a look at some of those land use plans because I don't think that he can make that statement stick. Furthermore, the way they're amended is by public council action, and the council action has taken place, so if there's any legal argument, it has been amended already. Third, we've had the city and county planners in both suburban and urban areas working with us, and they think this makes sense. So, you know, what is he driving at? I don't know.
Once you build a fixed corridor, then they have to give spatial attention to those corridors for building high-rises and businesses. In other words, they tell you now that we have this costly fixed rapid system that you must then orient your whole city planning to that, and this would be horrible.
But let me make a more important point. It does not have to induce high-rise activity if people don't want it to. Now, there are some of the stations where, as near as we can tell, the community does not want high-rise around it. It's fairly simple to prevent it. You can surround the station with a parking lot, and that discourages the formation of high-rise.
If there is a villain, a scapegoat in the rapid transit fight, it's the automobile. Politically, it has no friends, but secretly, most Americans love them, and they prove that love with their checkbooks. For 70 years, Americans have conducted a passionate love affair with cars. It was love at first crank, and the affair has not cooled. They've become more like mechanical mistresses than transportation, and like a mistress, they can have a drastic impact on the traditional American family life, pinched pocketbooks, even affected the nation's sexual mores. Even the specter of a country strangling in carbon monoxide hasn't caused a breakup between man and machine. The politics of rapid transit are inextricably locked into the politics of freeways. Transit and freeways are not enemies, as supposed. They literally are married, bound together on a proposed controversial Interstate 90 bridge over Lake Washington. Consequently, as forward thrust campaigns for rapid transit as a means of reducing freeways, the rail tracks can never connect Seattle and Bellevue unless the I-90 freeway segment through Mount Baker is built and the proposed new bridge widened. Channel 4 has learned that the marriage between transit and freeways was arranged a long time ago. Evidence of that is the admission by Duluth-Cather officials that no complete engineering study was ever done on a bridge to carry only rapid transit trains. Still, Mayor Wes Ullman sees only pavement ahead if the bonds fail.
Well, I think that without any question, if rapid transit is defeated on the 19th of the month, there's going to be tremendous pressure for I-90 and more I-90s and more bridges and more freeways, and I'm not sure that we're going to be able to withstand those pressures.
I think the mayor is absolutely right in what he has just said. We're confident in Washington that we're going to come out of this session of Congress with a public transportation support bill that'll be meaningful, that will have funds to assist the regions who are ready to go to the extent of 2/3 of the capital cost of a system. We should not overlook the fact that we have in Washington two very powerful senators, very strong representatives, and the fact of the matter is that I'm there in the Department of Transportation as well, and I think this should assure the people of Seattle that they're going to get a pretty good shake.
On May the 19th, voters will answer two questions with each vote. The first, can we afford rapid transit? An enormous amount of money is involved. $440 million in bonds, $900 million in federal matching funds, and over the life of the bonds, $627 million in interest payments. The second, with the population climbing, the metropolitan area spreading and in some places sprawling, and freeways proliferating, can we afford not to pass the bonds? Your one vote answers both questions. I'm Don McGaffin. Good night.